per foot along the lake. That's the way we sold it. In other states, you own to the vegetation line, and then somebody else owns the property between that line and the lake. So again, check on the state that you're in and make sure that you know what your exact laws are. So you'll be in good shape as far as the test is concerned. On the national portion of the test, they're not going to ask you state-specific questions. They're just going to say, do you know what littoral is? Yeah, it's the ownership rights on a lake or an ocean, okay? Now, we want to talk about a fixture. A fixture is real property that used to be personal property. For example, say you go down to the local hardware store and you buy a mailbox. Somebody backed over your mailbox last night out on the boulevard, and so you need to pick up a new mailbox. So you buy the box, you buy the post that goes into the ground, and you carry those home. Well, as you carry those home, what are they? They're personal property. They're movable, right? They're chattels or personalty, as we're going to see later on. But now you go home and you dig a hole in the boulevard, and you put that post down in there, and you put some Quikrete down in there, and you nail the mailbox to the top of the post. Well, now that personal property has become real property. That's what we're talking about when we talk about a fixture. There's 4 tests to a fixture. First test is the adaptation of the particular piece of property. I'll give you an example there. Let's talk about a real gourmet kitchen. And in this gourmet kitchen, there's an island in this kitchen. And this island is on rollers, it's on casters. You can move it around the kitchen. But the top of the island, the counter on the island, looks the same as the countertop in the kitchen. The cabinetry is the same as the cabinetry in the kitchen. And when you're done using the island, you can roll it over in the corner of the kitchen, and it fits right in a spot designed for it. Now, by definition, that's personal property. We can pick it up and walk away with it. But by adaptation, it's real property. It belongs in that kitchen. We can also take a second test of fixtures. That's going to be the agreement of the parties. What did the parties agree to in writing? And anytime you talk about personal property or fixtures, and you're in doubt, you're selling a house, and you're in doubt whether that thing is really attached to the property or not, put it in the contract. Put it in the agreement. That way, you and I can agree that if it's going to be personal property or it's going to be real property that's going to be transferred with that earnest money contract. Thirdly, what's the intent of the parties? Now, your best advice, of course, is put it in the agreement. But if you don't have it in the agreement, then we can talk about the intent. What do we intend to have happen here? And then finally, how is the thing attached? You may have mirrors in your house hanging on the wall, okay? Well, you can just go pick up that mirror, take it off the wall, and take it with you. It's not permanently attached. But what about the mirror over the bathroom sink? That thing is glued up there, it's attached up there. It's permanently attached. The one mirror is going to be personal property, the other real property. The mnemonic hook we're looking at here is AIM. Adaptation, agreement, intent, and method of attachment. Now, in talking about trade fixtures are going to be items of personal property that are used in a trade or business. You're only going to find trade fixtures in leased property. And I've got a picture of the vault here because a vault is the biggest trade fixture I've ever seen. Back in I guess it was the mid-1980s, there was a bank that was in the end cap of a shopping center. And the bank went broke, so they leased it to somebody else, and they had to take the vault out of there. And so they literally had to tear the wall down of the building, take the vault out. The vault was, I think it was like 20 by 30 or something. They had to jackhammer it out of the concrete. They had to get a crane in there, pull the vault out of there. They had then to fix the concrete and put the wall back up. Because when you remove a trade fixture, the lease says that you have to repair the damages that it caused. But that was a trade fixture. Was it permanently attached to that bank at one time? Sure it was. But when the bank left, the vault went with them. Now, another area that sometimes causes some problems is that you don't know what to do with trees, shrubs, flowers, landscaping, fructus naturalis, and that is all going to be real property. So you see the bushes, the trees around this particular house here, we're going to consider that real property. We'll say that the people that own the home have prize rose bushes in the backyard. and they're thinking they're going to take those prize rose bushes with them. Well, they're really part of the real property. So you're going to have to negotiate those in the contract, because landscaping, and that would be considered landscaping, is part of the real property. Now we contrast that with fructus industrialis, which are crops. Crops are going to be personal property. So think about an apple orchard. The apple trees are real property, but the apples themselves are personal property. And if you're selling that apple orchard, you're going to have to negotiate who gets to own the apples when they're ripe and ready to be harvested. Same thing when you talk about a field of soybean or corn or maize or cotton. All of that is going to be crops. All of that's going to be considered fructus industrialis, or emblements is the other word we're going to use for that. And it's all considered personal property. Now, personal property, 3 words you could see for this: personalty or chattels, is movable. And remember, we're going to sell personal property by a bill of sale. If we're going to sell real property, typically we're going to use a deed, but personal property is going to be a bill of sale. Now, an estate is the ownership interest or claim a person has in real property. When you have an estate, we're talking about that bundle of rights. And the type of estate is going to determine which one of those rights that we're actually going to get when we buy that property. So an estate is going to be the quantity and quality of that bundle of rights, and each estate then is going to be different by the number of rights that you get with it. So let's take a look at those. We have estates of ownership, which are going to be freehold estates. We'll talk about those first, and then in a moment we'll come back and we'll talk about less than freehold estates or non-freehold estates, and those are going to be estates of tenancy. Now, talking about freehold estates, I want to talk about first estates in fee. And estates in fee are going to be the highest quantity and quality of ownership. It's going to be the greatest number of that bundle of rights that we talked about. Typically, what you and I are going to sell when we transfer real estate is we're going to sell a fee simple absolute. That's going to be the highest quantity and quality of those rights, fee simple absolute. Now, if we don't transfer a fee simple absolute, we might transfer a fee simple qualified, or we could call that a defeasible fee. Let me write that down for you. It could be called a defeasible fee, or it could also be called a conditional. Now notice in the word defeasible here that we have, it looks like defeat. And that's what a defeasible fee is. It can be defeated for some reason. Let me give you an example. I'll pretend I'm a very wealthy person, and I give away some land to the city to build a library on. And I give it to them as a defeasible fee. I say this in my deed: I will give you this land as long as you build a library on it. If at some point in time it never is a library, I'm going to take the land back. In other words, that fee is going to be defeated. But as long as there's a library on that property, you get to own that property. I'm familiar with another defeasible type of fee. There was a major hotel corporation that came in to buy a piece of land in a town not far from where I live. And they were getting all ready to buy this land, and then they start looking at the deed, and the deed said this: this land could be used for any legal purpose, as long as alcohol wasn't served on the land. If alcohol was ever served on that land, it was going to go back to its original owner or the heirs of that original owner. And so the motel corporation didn't buy the land because they wanted to put a bar there. But it was a defeasible fee. There was conditional. As long as that property wasn't being used to serve alcohol, there wasn't a problem. If that ever happened, it was going to go back to the original owners. You say, Tom, can you do that? Yeah, you can do that as long as the purpose is legal, and that was perfectly legal. There's some things that you could not make conditional, but that's obviously one of the things that you could. Now, those are estates in fee. Another type of freehold estate is going to be the life estates. And I think you should be familiar with the life estates and know what's going on with those. So we're going to draw those out and discuss those a little bit. Now, the first ones we want to talk about are ordinary. Life Estates.